My parents made me pretend I was the one who got pregnant, so my 14-year-old sister could stay in school. When I said I was losing everything I'd worked for, Mom just looked at me and said, "That's what big sisters are for." I didn't answer. That was 2 years ago. Last week, I got a graduation card from my sister. She signed it for both of us. What's the real reason your parents had you? I found out when I was 5 years old, and my parents strapped me to a table to drain my blood while I screamed that they'd only had me to keep my older brother Liam alive. Liam was born with severe hemophilia that made his blood basically water, and after spending their life savings on treatments that didn't work, my parents decided to create their own solution, me. They literally conceived me to be a walking blood bag for their real son, the one they actually wanted. Once I hit 40 pounds, the bloodletting began. Mom explained it like a bedtime story that night while the black market nurse they'd hired searched for a vein in my tiny arm. "You're so special," she cooed. "God made you to save your brother. That's why you're here." But even at 5, I knew kids shouldn't exist just to be spare parts. From then on, they took my blood every month. I'd sit hooked to the machine in our basement watching my blood flow through tubes into bags marked with Liam's name. Dad would ruffle my hair and call me our little hero, like I'd volunteered for this instead of being bred for it. After each session, Liam got cookies while I got dizzy spells and iron pills that made me puke. But Liam didn't like it either. He'd sneak into my room afterward with his own cookies, and we'd eat them under my blanket fort while he told me stories. When I'm better, he'd always say, "I'll take care of you for once." Neither of us understood then that he'd never get better, and I'd never stop bleeding for him. By the time I was 10, the monthly draws became every 2 weeks because Liam's condition was deteriorating. I'd miss school every other Friday to sit in the basement while they drained me. My teachers asked about my constant exhaustion, the bruises on my arms that never healed before new ones appeared. Mom told them I was anemic and clumsy. I tried refusing once, told my parents I had an important test. Dad grabbed my shoulders hard enough to leave marks. "Would you rather take a test or keep your brother alive?" Liam heard the argument and that night tried to refuse the transfusion, saying he'd rather die than keep hurting me. Mom sedated him. The next morning he apologized for his outburst, and I realized they'd convinced him that not taking my blood was selfish because he'd be forcing me to watch his hero die. When I was 16 and he was 18, Liam had a major bleed that almost killed him. After that, weekly transfusions became the new normal. Every Monday, I'd sit in that chair for 3 hours while they took more than they should. I started fainting in class, collapsing during basketball practice. When the school nurse demanded a real medical exam, the doctor pulled me aside afterward. "You're dangerously anemic," he said. "Your body can't keep up with this donation schedule. You need to cut back to once a month maximum, or you'll have permanent damage." My parents nodded solemnly in his office, then laughed about it in the car. "Once a month," Mom mocked. "Does he want Liam to die?" They put me on prescription iron supplements and vitamin injections to keep me functional enough to donate, but told Liam I was just out of shape from quitting sports. I got accepted to college with a basketball scholarship based on my performance before my body started shutting down. For the first time, I saw a future beyond needles and blood bags. I told my parents I was going, that Liam could get transfusions from a blood bank. Mom laughed, thinking I was joking. When she realized I was serious, she went pale. "The blood bank isn't reliable. You're his only guaranteed match." Dad held up my acceptance letter and ripped it in half. "You're not going anywhere." But then came the betrayal I never saw coming. They worked on Liam for days, showing him articles about blood shortages, contamination scares, people who died waiting for transfusions. They said I was exaggerating the side effects and lied that a doctor had cleared me medically. By the time they were done, my brother looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Please don't choose basketball over my life." I tried explaining I wasn't choosing basketball. I was choosing to stay healthy enough to help him long term, but all he heard was abandonment. That night, I heard him telling our parents to make sure I couldn't leave, that maybe they should look into legal ways to keep me home. 3 days before orientation, I came home to find my parents, Liam, and a lawyer in our living room. They'd drawn up papers making me legally responsible for Liam's care, including mandatory blood donation. The new schedule showed twice weekly donations with careful supplement regimens to keep me optimally productive. If I refused, they'd sue me for attempted murder through medical neglect. "The increased frequency is temporary," Mom lied smoothly to Liam, "just until we find additional donors." But I saw the truth in the lawyer's paperwork. This was permanent. They'd calculated exactly how much blood they could take without culling me, how to keep me functional but too weak to run. "Just sign it," Liam said from his wheelchair. "Please, I need you." My parents had turned my brother into my prison warden without him knowing he was signing my death warrant in slow motion. I had 3 days to escape before they legally chained me to a schedule that would keep me barely alive, bleeding out drop by drop. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling from more than just blood loss. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and pointed to the signature line with a manicured finger. My parents sat on either side of Liam, their faces masks of concern that didn't reach their eyes. The room spun slightly as I stood. 3 days, 72 hours before they'd drag me back from orientation if I tried to leave. The papers crinkled in my grip as I pretended to read them, buying time while my mind raced through escape plans. Mom cleared her throat. I glanced up to see her checking her watch. They had the basement prepped for another draw tonight. Of course they did. Keep me weak, keep me compliant. I set the papers on the coffee table without signing. Dad's jaw tightened. He started to stand, but Mom touched his arm, keeping him seated. They'd rehearsed this, planned for resistance. Liam wheeled himself closer. His hand found mine, cold and thin. I looked down at our intertwined fingers, remembering when he used to sneak me cookies after the draws. Now he was asking me to sign my life away. The lawyer gathered his briefcase and stood. He handed Dad a business card, whispering something about filing deadlines. They had backup plans, legal mechanisms to force my compliance if I refused. I helped Liam to his room that night, lifting him from the wheelchair to his bed. He weighed nothing, bird bones and tissue paper skin. As I pulled the blanket to his chin, he grabbed my wrist. His eyes searched mine, desperate and afraid. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He relaxed slightly, interpreting my silence as agreement. Another betrayal to add to the collection. Back in my room, I pulled out my duffel bag and started packing. Quiet movements, careful selections, only essentials. My acceptance letter lay in pieces in the trash, but I had digital copies. The scholarship was still valid if I could make it to orientation. A knock interrupted my packing. Mom entered without waiting, carrying a tray with pills and water, my evening supplements. She watched me swallow each one, checking under my tongue afterward like I was a psych patient. She noticed the half-packed bag on my bed. Her smile never wavered as she zipped it closed and carried it to my closet, placing it on the highest shelf. A warning. We both knew I was too weak to climb for it without falling. That night, I lay awake planning. The house had 2 exits, front and back. Both had new locks installed last week, the kind that locked from inside with keys my parents kept. My bedroom window had been painted shut years ago after my first escape attempt at 13. The basement session would happen tomorrow. They'd keep me down there for hours, draining more than usual to ensure I couldn't run. By the time I recovered enough to walk steadily, another day would pass, then another session, a perfect cycle of weakness. I dozed fitfully, waking to footsteps in the hall. Dad's heavy tread paused outside my door. The knob turned slowly, locked. I'd wedged a chair under it too, but he didn't try to force entry, just checking, making sure their investment remained secure. Morning came with Mom's cheerful knock. Breakfast was fortified oatmeal and more pills. She chatted about grocery shopping, asking what foods I wanted, playing normal while we both knew I'd be too weak to eat much after tonight's session. Liam joined us at the table, pushed by Dad. He looked better today, some color in his cheeks from yesterday's transfusion, my blood keeping him alive while culling me slowly. He smiled and reached for my hand again. I let him take it. School was out of the question. Mom called the office, explaining I had a medical procedure scheduled. Not technically a lie. She hung up and turned to find me listening. Her expression dared me to object. I spent the morning in my room conserving energy. Every movement calculated, every action planned. I'd need strength for what came next. The acceptance letter might be torn, but other documents existed. Bank statements showing my savings from part-time jobs. Medical records from before they started lying to doctors. Lunch was soup and iron supplements. Mom watched me eat every bite. Liam tried making conversation about a TV show we used to watch together. I responded enough to seem normal, storing energy with each breath. 2 o'clock approached like a funeral march. Dad appeared in my doorway, car keys jangling. Time for the basement. Time for the chair and tubes and bags marked with my brother's name. I stood slowly, fighting dizziness. I wonder what kind of parents plan their child's whole life before they're even born. Not for that child's happiness, but just to use them. The way they call the narrators special and our little hero while taking their blood makes me curious about how they sleep at night knowing what they're doing to their own kid. Each step toward the basement door felt like walking through quicksand. Mom followed close behind, ready to catch me if I fell, or ready to push me if I resisted. The basement smelled like rubbing alcohol and fear. The chair waited, vinyl cracked from years of use. The machine hummed quietly, hungry for blood. Fresh bags hung ready, labels printed with today's date. The nurse was already there, the same woman who'd stuck needles in my 5-year-old arms. She didn't meet my eyes anymore, just gestured to the chair. Professional distance from the crime she helped commit. I sat. The vinyl was cold through my thin shirt. Mom secured the arm straps while Dad watched the stairs. No escape, no rescue. Just me and the machine and the blood they'd steal to keep their real son alive. The needle went in smooth, practiced. I watched the tube fill red, my life flowing away drop by drop. 3 hours of this. 3 hours to plan. 3 hours to find a way out before they filed those papers and trapped me forever. Liam appeared at the top of the stairs, Dad helping him down. He wanted to watch today, to thank me for my sacrifice. He settled in a chair across from mine, reaching for my free hand. I let him take it, feeling his pulse through paper skin while mine drained away. The machine hummed its vampire song. Mom produced knitting from her bag, settling in for the long haul. Dad read a magazine about classic cars, normal family activities while they slowly murdered one child to save another. Time crawled. My vision grayed at the edges, but I forced myself to stay conscious. Passing out meant they'd take more, push the limits while I couldn't protest. I counted breaths, calculated the hours until orientation, measured my remaining strength against the locks on the doors. 2 hours in, Liam dozed off, still holding my hand. His color looked better already, my blood working its magic while I withered. Mom adjusted his blanket without dropping a stitch. Dad turned another page. The nurse checked the bags, making notes on her clipboard. Almost done. Almost survived another session. Tomorrow they'd file the papers unless I found a way out tonight. 70 hours and counting. The nurse disconnected the tubes with practiced efficiency. I slumped forward, catching myself on the armrest before I could fall. 3 bags full, more than usual. Mom noticed my struggle and smiled, patting my shoulder as she helped me stand. The walk upstairs took forever. Each step required concentration, my legs shaking with the effort. Liam watched from his chair, concern flickering across his face before Dad wheeled him away. I made it to my room and collapsed on the bed, the ceiling spinning in lazy circles above me. Through the thin walls, I heard my parents discussing dinner plans. Normal conversation for a normal family. Nothing about the son they were slowly killing in their basement. Nothing about the papers waiting for my signature. Sleep pulled at me, but I fought it. 68 hours until orientation. I needed to stay awake, needed to plan. My phone buzzed under my pillow. A text from my friend Nathy, asking about graduation parties. I typed a response with trembling fingers, then deleted it. No point making plans I couldn't keep. The house settled into evening routines. Dad's footsteps on the stairs. Mom's voice calling Liam for his medications. The familiar sounds of my prison. I forced myself upright, testing my balance. Better than expected. The supplements were working, keeping me just functional enough. I crept to my door, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence in the hallway. My parents had grown comfortable with my compliance, confident in their control. That confidence would be their mistake. The closet door opened silently. I dragged a chair over, climbing carefully to reach my duffel bag. My vision darkened at the edges from the effort, but I managed to pull it down without falling. Small victories. Inside the bag, tucked between clothes, lay my lifeline. $500 in cash from months of tutoring kids in math. Not much, but enough for a bus ticket and food. Enough to get me to orientation if I could just get out of the house. Footsteps in the hall sent me scrambling back to bed. Mom entered without knocking, carrying another tray of pills. She frowned at the chair by the closet, but said nothing. I swallowed the supplements obediently, opening my mouth for inspection afterward. She sat on my bed, smoothing the covers with careful hands. Her fingers found my wrist, checking my pulse with false concern. Too fast. She noticed, of course. Mom noticed everything. She left eventually, but not before moving the chair back to my desk. A silent message. She knew I'd been planning something. The lock on my door clicked from the outside, a new addition I hadn't noticed before. Panic fluttered in my chest. They were accelerating their timeline, tightening their control. I tested the window again, pushing against the painted seal. It didn't budge. Years of paint layers had created an impenetrable barrier. My phone buzzed again, this time from my basketball coach, confirming orientation details. 3 days to report or lose the scholarship. 3 days to save my life. I deleted the message before Mom could check my phone later. The house grew quiet as night deepened. I lay still, listening to the sounds of my family preparing for bed. Dad's snoring started first, a familiar rumble through the walls. Mom took longer, but eventually her movements stilled. I waited another hour, then tried my door. Still locked. Of course, they'd thought of everything, or so they believed. My desk drawer held years of accumulated junk. Paper clips, rubber bands, old birthday cards from Liam. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, lay my lock-picking set, a gift from Nathy last Christmas, meant as a joke. He'd never know how much it would mean. The lock was simple, designed to keep me in, rather than keep others out. My hands shook as I worked, partly from blood blood loss, partly from fear. Each tiny click sounded like thunder in the silence. 20 minutes later, the lock gave way. I eased the door open, wincing at every creak. The hallway stretched before me, dark and full of danger. My parents' room lay at the far end, door cracked open. Dad's snoring continued, steady and deep. I gathered my bag and crept toward the stairs. Each step measured, each breath controlled. The third stair from the top always creaked. I remembered from years of sneaking to the kitchen after blood draws, desperate for food to stop the dizziness. I skipped the third stair, stretching my leg to reach the fourth. My balance wavered, weakness making me clumsy. I caught myself on the banister, heart hammering against my ribs. The front door loomed before me. New locks gleamed in the moonlight, deadbolts that required keys from both sides. I searched the table by the door, the hooks where keys usually hung. Nothing. They'd hidden them. Back door then. I crept through the kitchen, avoiding the squeaky floorboard near the refrigerator. The back door had the same new locks, no keys anywhere. They'd turned our home into a proper prison. Frustration burned in my throat, so close to freedom, yet trapped by simple locks and hidden keys. I leaned against the counter, fighting despair. There had to be another way. The basement door caught my eye. They never locked it, confident I'd never return to that place voluntarily. I eased it open, descending into my personal hell. The medical equipment sat silent in the darkness, waiting for tomorrow's session. But there, in the corner, stood my salvation. The basement had old-style windows, small but possible. Years ago, Dad had talked about replacing them but never followed through. Too expensive, he'd said, not a priority. I dragged a box under the window, testing its weight. The cardboard crumpled slightly but held. The window latch was rusted, painted over like everything else in this house. I worked at it with my fingernails, then with a screwdriver from Dad's toolbox. The latch gave way with a grinding protest. I froze, listening for movement upstairs. Nothing but Dad's continued snoring. I pushed the window open, cool night air flooding the basement. Freedom smelled like grass and possibility. The window was narrow, designed for ventilation rather than escape. I pushed my bag through first, hearing it thud on the ground outside. Then came the hard part, fitting myself through an opening barely wider than my shoulders. I went head first, wriggling like a snake. The frame scraped my ribs, caught on my hips. For a terrifying moment, I stuck halfway through, legs dangling in the basement while my torso hung outside. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. If they found me like this, trapped and helpless, desperation gave me strength. I twisted, pulled, ignored the pain as metal and wood scraped skin. With a final push, I tumbled onto the grass, free. My shirt was torn, ribs bruised, but I was out. I grabbed my bag and ran, or tried to run. My legs wobbled, weak from blood loss and exertion. I managed a stumbling jog, heading for the tree line behind our house. Distance first, then planning. The woods were dark, branches catching at my clothes and hair. I pushed through, driven by fear and determination. Behind me, the house remained dark and quiet. They hadn't discovered my escape yet. I emerged on the other side of the woods near the old gas station. Closed for the night, but the payphone still worked. I fed at quarters with shaking hands, dialing the only number I could trust. Nathy answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. I explained in rushed whispers, begging for help. He didn't question, didn't judge. 20 minutes, he promised. Wait by the dumpsters. Those 20 minutes stretched like hours. Every car made me duck, certain it was Dad coming to drag me back. My legs gave out after 10 minutes, forcing me to sit on the cold concrete. Talk about finding creative solutions to tough problems. Who knew basement windows could be better escape routes than front doors? Our hero just turned their parents' medical dungeon into their own personal exit strategy, proving that sometimes the worst places hold the best opportunities. The world spun lazily, reminding me of my weakness. Nathy's hit-up Honda finally appeared, headlights cutting through darkness. He took one look at me and swore, helping me into the passenger seat. I'd never been so grateful for a friend. His apartment was small but safe. He made me eat soup and drink water while I explained everything. The blood draws, the legal papers, the locks. His face grew darker with each detail, hands clenching into fists. We stayed up planning. Bus tickets were traceable. They'd expect that. But Nathy's cousin Allie lived 2 states over, halfway to my college. She'd let me stay a night, help me figure out the rest. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Morning came too soon. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Mom, Dad, even Liam. I turned it off, knowing they could track it. Nathy drove me to Allie's, taking back roads and checking mirrors constantly. The drive took 6 hours. I dozed fitfully, waking to panic each time. My body craved rest, demanded time to recover from years of abuse, but time was luxury I couldn't afford. Allie met us at a rest stop outside her town. The cousin transfer felt like a spy movie, but it was necessary. My parents would check Nathy's place first. He needed distance from my escape. Allie's apartment was bigger, filled with plants and sunlight. She made me shower and eat, mothering me despite being only 2 years older. I felt human again, almost normal, but normal was an illusion. My phone, turned on briefly to check the time, showed 57 missed calls. They'd filed a missing person report. Police were looking for a sick teenager who'd fled necessary medical care. I called the police myself from Allie's phone, explained calmly that I wasn't missing, wasn't sick, was legally an adult. The officer sounded skeptical but took my information. One problem managed. The next call was harder. My college admissions office listened to my abbreviated story, promised to note my situation. The scholarship was still mine if I could get there. 2 days left. Allie drove me to the bus station that evening. Different town, different terminal than they'd expect. I bought a ticket with cash, choosing a route with multiple transfers. Harder to track, harder to intercept. The first bus smelled like disinfectant and despair. I found a seat near the back, bag clutched tight. An elderly woman smiled at me, offering cookies from her purse. I took one, the sweetness making me think of Liam, my brother. The guilt hit hard, threatening to overwhelm me. He was sick, truly sick. He needed blood to survive. But did that mean I had to die for him? Did love require self-destruction? The bus rumbled through the night, carrying me toward freedom. I changed buses at dawn, bleary-eyed and anxious. The second driver barely glanced at my ticket, too tired to care about another runaway. My phone stayed off, but I knew the messages were piling up. Accusations, threats, pleas. Liam's voice would be among them, confused and hurt. My parents would have told him I'd abandoned him, chosen selfishness over family. The final bus brought me within 50 miles of campus. So close, yet still vulnerable. My body was failing, pushed too hard for too long. I could feel it in my racing pulse, the gray edges of my vision. A taxi would cost too much. I started walking, thumb out for rides. Dangerous for a weak teenager, but desperation made me reckless. A truck driver took pity, offering a ride to the next town. He talked about his daughter, away at college studying nursing. I smiled and nodded, fighting to stay conscious. The truck's heater made me drowsy, but sleep meant vulnerability. He dropped me at another gas station, wishing me luck. 30 miles to go. I bought water and energy bars, forcing myself to eat. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed hollow eyes and pale skin. I looked like death walking. Another ride, this time from a college student student heading back to campus. Different school, but close enough. She chattered about classes and parties while I calculated distances and time. 24 hours until orientation, 10 miles to campus. I could walk it if necessary, crawl if I had to. Freedom was so close I could taste it, but my body had other plans. The trembling started first, then the dizziness. I made it 2 miles before my legs gave out completely. I sat on the curb, fighting tears of frustration. A campus security car stopped, officer stepping out with concern. I showed him my acceptance letter, explained I was early for orientation. He didn't question the lie, just helped me into the car. The drive to campus took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to freedom, to safety, to a life where my blood belonged to me. I memorized every turn, every building we passed. The health center was my first stop. The nurse took one look at me and called for a doctor. Blood tests, IV fluids, gentle questions about my condition. I told them enough, medical neglect, but not the full truth. Not yet. They admitted me overnight for observation. A clean bed, regular meals, and no needles draining my life away. I slept deeply for the first time in years. Body finally safe enough to rest. Morning brought more tests and concerned doctors. My blood count was dangerously low, organs showing signs of strain. Years of excessive donation had left its mark, but I was young, resilient. With proper care, I'd recover. The admissions office sent someone to check on me. They'd received calls from my parents, claims that I was mentally unstable and needed immediate psychiatric care. The representative looked at my medical charts, at the evidence of long-term blood loss, and made notes. I was assigned a temporary dorm room and a campus advocate, someone to help navigate the legal complexities of my situation. The scholarship remained intact, contingent on my health improving, but the calls didn't stop. My phone, finally turned on, showed hundreds of messages. Threats of legal action, promises to drag me home, claims that Liam was dying without me. I changed my number that afternoon. The harder part was the guilt. Every moment of freedom came weighted with the knowledge of Liam's suffering. He wasn't responsible for our parents' choices, wasn't to blame for being sick, yet his illness had nearly cold me. I wrote him a letter that night, explained everything our parents had hidden, included copies of my medical records showing the damage, promised to help find legitimate donors, to be part of his care team once I was healthy. But first, I had to save myself. The orientation began 2 days later. I walked across campus on shaky legs, marveling at the simple freedom of choosing my own path. Other freshmen complained about early morning sessions and confusing schedules. I smiled at every minor inconvenience. My roommate arrived that afternoon, a cheerful girl named Victoria, who immediately shortened it to Tori. She didn't question my medical equipment or frequent naps, just offered to share her mini fridge and asked about my major. But freedom wasn't simple. The legal threats materialized into actual papers, served by a nervous student worker. My parents were suing for medical abandonment, claiming contractual obligation to provide blood. The advocate helped me find a lawyer, but the fight was just beginning. Worse were the messages that got through. Photos of Liam in the hospital, pale and weak, guilt trips from extended family who'd heard only my parents' version, accusations of selfishness and cruelty from people who didn't know the truth. I focused on healing, on building a life beyond blood draws. Classes started, bringing structure and purpose. I joined study groups, made friends who knew nothing of my past, normal college experiences that felt like miracles, but normal was still fragile. I fainted during a psychology lecture, body still recovering from years of abuse. The professor called an ambulance despite my protests. Another hospital visit, another round of concerned questions. The truth came out slowly, in pieces. Campus counseling sessions where I finally spoke about the basement chair, support group meetings with other medical abuse survivors, legal depositions detailing every forced donation. My parents escalated their tactics. They contacted professors claiming I was dangerous and delusional, sent photos to my roommate warning her about my violent tendencies, posted on social media about their ungrateful child who'd abandoned a dying brother. But truth has power. My medical records spoke louder than their lies. The years of documentation showed a clear pattern of abuse disguised as medical care. Even relatives who'd supported them began asking questions. The turning point came through an unexpected source. The black market nurse, facing her own legal troubles, agreed to testify. She'd kept records, noted my parents' instructions to take more than safe amounts. Her guilt had finally overwhelmed her greed. With her testimony, the legal tide turned. My parents' lawsuit crumbled, replaced by criminal investigations, child endangerment, medical neglect, fraud. The charges piled up like the blood bags in our basement. But victory felt hollow without Liam. My brother remained trapped, poisoned against me by years of lies. He refused my calls, returned my letters unopened. In his mind, I was the villain who'd chosen college over his life. I kept trying, sending updates through mutual friends. Slowly, cracks appeared in my parents' narrative. Liam started asking questions, noticing inconsistencies. Why hadn't they found other donors? Why was I the only solution? The truth, when he finally accepted it, broke him. He called me sobbing, apologizing for years of unknowing complicity. We talked for hours, rebuilding our relationship on honesty instead of guilt. Together, we found real solutions, legitimate medical care, proper donor programs, treatments that didn't require draining one child to save another. It wasn't easy or quick, but it was sustainable. They're tracking her through multiple states, filing false missing person reports, but somehow can't figure out she'd head straight to the college that already accepted her. Something feels off about these parents who controlled every detail of her life for 18 years, suddenly being this sloppy. My health improved gradually. The fainting stopped, color returned to my skin. I made the basketball team as a bench warmer, but even sitting on the sidelines felt like triumph. Every practice was proof that my body belonged to me. The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected. Within days of the nurse's testimony, detectives arrived on campus with questions. I met them in a conference room at the health center, my advocate beside me. They needed details about the basement setup, the frequency of draws, the amounts taken. I provided everything, watching them exchange concerned glances as the scope became clear. My parents tried damage control. They showed up at campus unannounced, demanding to see me. Security intercepted them at the main gate. I watched from my dorm window as they argued with the guards, mom's gestures growing frantic. Dad paced beside their car, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling their lawyer. The restraining order came through that afternoon. Temporary, but enough to keep them away while the investigation continued. Tori helped me move to a different dorm, one with better security. She never asked questions, just carried boxes and made jokes about the adventure. Liam's calls increased. He'd moved in with our aunt temporarily, away from our parents' influence. Each conversation revealed more lies they'd told him. The additional donors they'd promised never existed. The medical clearance for increased donations was forged. Even the lawyer who drew up the papers was unlicensed, a friend of Dad's from work. I sent him my medical files, years of test results showing the progressive damage. He went quiet for days after receiving them. When he finally finally called back, his voice was different, angry, not at me, but at them, at himself for not seeing it sooner. The detective called with updates. They'd seized the basement equipment, found documentation of every session. Mom had kept meticulous records, thinking they proved her dedication to Liam's care. Instead, they showed a pattern of escalating abuse. The amounts taken, the frequency, all far beyond safe limits for someone my size and age. Classes became my refuge. I threw myself into studying, making up for years of exhaustion-dulled learning. My professors noticed the improvement, commenting on my increased participation. One even suggested I consider their honors program next semester. The basketball coach approached me after practice. I'd been cleared for light training, mostly shooting drills and strategy sessions. He wanted to know if I'd consider assistant coaching while I recovered, help with the younger players, share my knowledge. I accepted immediately. My health improved daily. The IV treatments continued twice a week, rebuilding what years of drainage had stolen. My blood count climbed steadily. The dizzy spells decreased. I could climb stairs without pausing, walk across campus without planning rest stops. Liam started his own investigation. He contacted the doctors who'd treated him over the years, asking about alternatives to family donation. Turns out, several had suggested other options. Our parents had dismissed them all, insisting I was the perfect solution. One doctor even noted concerns about my health in Liam's file, questions our parents never answered. The arrests happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in chemistry class when my phone buzzed with the news. Both parents, charged with child endangerment, medical neglect, and fraud. The black market nurse faced separate charges. Even the fake lawyer was in custody. I excused myself from class, finding a quiet spot in the library to process. No triumph, just hollow relief. They'd made their choices. Now came consequences. Liam called within minutes. He'd been notified as next of kin. We didn't need words, just shared silence while the reality settled. Our family, such as it was, had imploded, but maybe something better could grow from the wreckage. The media tried to pick up the story. A local reporter called, having gotten wind of the arrests. I declined to comment. This wasn't about attention or revenge, just survival and justice. The campus PR department helped shield me from further inquiries. My parents posted bail within days. Their assets weren't frozen yet, and they had supporters who believed their version. People who saw a desperate family trying to save their sick child, not systematic abuse of another. They tried contacting me through intermediaries. Extended family members called with messages. Former family friends reached out on social media, all carrying the same theme: forgiveness, family loyalty, thinking of Liam's needs. I blocked them all. The preliminary hearing was set for next month. The prosecutor wanted me to testify. I agreed, though the thought made my stomach churn. Facing them in court, telling strangers about the basement chair, the stolen blood, but silence had enabled them for too long. Liam found a legitimate treatment program at a research hospital. They were developing new therapies for hemophilia, treatments that didn't require constant transfusions. He qualified for their trial. Insurance would cover most costs, and a foundation grant would handle the rest. No more basement, no more blood bags, no more draining one child to save another. I helped him move closer to the hospital. We rented a small apartment together, splitting costs. He was still weak, still sick, but hopeful for the first time in years. We cooked meals together, watched movies, rebuilt our relationship without our parents' poison between us. The coach increased my responsibilities. I designed plays, mentored struggling players, found purpose in teaching. My own playing days might be limited, but I could still contribute. The team started calling me Coach Junior, a title that made me smile. Midterms came and went. I passed everything, even earned 2 A's. My advisor suggested summer courses to catch up on credits missed while sick. I registered immediately, eager to fill gaps in my education. The trial date approached. The prosecutor met with me weekly, preparing testimony. She showed me the evidence they'd gathered, photos of the basement setup, the nurse's records, medical reports documenting my declining health over the years, overwhelming proof of what they'd done. My parents' lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. They'd admit to lesser charges, avoid trial, serve minimal time. The prosecutor asked my opinion. I told her to refuse. They needed to face what they'd done, publicly. No more hiding behind good intentions. Liam's treatment showed promise. His bleeding episodes decreased, his energy improved. He started talking about returning to school, getting his own degree. We researched programs together, finding one that accommodated his medical needs. The trial began on a Monday. I sat in the witness waiting room, hands steady despite the churning in my stomach. Other witnesses filled the benches. The nurse, looking smaller without her medical authority, doctors who'd treated me over the years, even my high school basketball coach, ready to testify about my declining performance. My turn came after lunch. I walked to the witness stand on solid legs, no trembling or weakness. Months of recovery had restored my strength. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, then sat facing the courtroom. My parents sat at the defense table. Mom had styled her hair differently, softer. Dad wore his best suit. They were playing the part of concerned parents, misunderstood in their desperation. But I saw through the performance now. The prosecutor led me through my story, the first time at 5 years old, the escalating schedule, the lies to doctors, the legal threats. I kept my voice steady, clinical, just facts, no emotion. The emotion would come later, in private. The defense attorney tried to twist my words, suggested I was ungrateful, selfish, abandoning a sick brother. I responded with medical records, test results, documented proof of damage. Hard to argue with numbers. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge scheduled sentencing for next month, remanded them to custody as flight risks. They were led away in handcuffs, mom crying, dad stone-faced. I felt nothing but tired relief. Liam waited outside the courthouse. We didn't speak, just walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench watching normal families play. Eventually, he broke the silence, talking about his treatment, his hopes for the future. I listened, grateful for forward momentum. The sentencing brought 5 years each, possibility of parole in 3. The nurse got 2 years, the fake lawyer 18 months. Justice, of a sort. Enough time for Liam and me to build lives without their shadow. I returned to campus, to classes and coaching. Finals approached. I studied in the library, surrounded by normal college stress. Beautiful, ordinary pressure that had nothing to do with blood or basements. I aced my exams. Summer arrived with new possibilities. I enrolled in classes, worked basketball camps, saved money. Liam's treatment continued to progress. He started a part-time job, gentle work that didn't strain his body. We found rhythm in our shared apartment, 2 brothers learning to be family on our own terms. The scholarship committee reviewed my case. Despite the missed practices, the health issues, they renewed my funding. Academic performance and coaching contributions outweighed athletic limitations. I'd found my place. Second year began with familiar routines, classes, coaching, careful health management. I made the team as a full player, limited minutes but real participation. The first time I scored, the bench erupted. Tori was in the stands, cheering louder than anyone. My parents' letters arrived monthly from prison. I returned them unopened. Liam read his, sometimes sharing excerpts. Apologies mixed with justifications. Claims of love twisted with blame. We were learning to recognize manipulation, even when it came wrapped in parental concern. Criminal charges for basement bloodletting? That's quite the family reunion nobody asked for. Turns out cruel and unusual wasn't just describing their parenting style, but also their future legal problems. The past would always exist. Scars on my arms from years of needles. Medical issues that might resurface. A complicated relationship with a brother I'd been created to save. But I was more than their solution now. I was a student, a coach, a friend, a person whose blood belonged to himself. I scheduled regular donations at the campus blood center. Proper amounts, safe frequency, helping strangers who needed it. Giving because I chose to, not because I was forced. The nurse there didn't know my history, just smiled and thanked me for contributing. I smiled back, meaning it. Thanks for tagging along while I questioned basically everything today. It's been a ride. Hopefully we get to do this again sometime soon. Subscribe for more content like this.